How do you think that the last 24 hours of a death row inmate looks like? Well, let's find out. So, the last 24 hours of a death row inmate can be filled with a mix of emotions and uncertainty as they come to terms with their impending executions. Despite having been convicted of a capital crime and sentenced to death, many inmates hold out hope for a last-minute reprieve or stay of execution. However, as hours tick by, they must begin to prepare themselves for their final moments. So in this video, we will explore what the last 24 hours of a death row inmate is typically like, including the procedures and protocols that are followed to ensure that the execution process runs smoothly. In most cases, death row inmates are transferred to a special facility designed for executions, typically located near the state prison where they were housed. This is essentially done at least 24 hours before the scheduled execution time. Around 6 hours before the scheduled execution time, the inmate is usually awakened by the staff and given the opportunity to shower and change into fresh clothing. They may also be offered a light breakfast or brunch. The inmate is then allowed to meet with the legal team one last time to discuss any final legal matters or appeals. They may also be given the opportunity to make a final statement or record a final message to be played after their death. Once at the execution facility, the inmate is placed in a special holding cell designed for death row inmates. The cell is usually small with only basic furnishings such as a bed, a table, and a chair. The inmate is allowed to make phone calls to family and friends and to meet with spiritual advisors or lawyers. During this time, the inmate may also be offered a last meal. Although this varies depending on the state and the facility, some states have stopped offering last meals due to concerns that inmates were abusing the privilege by ordering excessive or expensive food. Around 3 hours before the scheduled execution time, the inmate is usually allowed to meet with family members or loved ones for a last visit. These visits are typically supervised and may be limited to a certain number of people or a specific length of time. During this time, the staff continues to monitor the inmate's physical and mental state, checking vital signs such as blood pressure and pulse. The inmate may be given a medication to help them relax or sleep. Now, 1 hour before execution. So around this time, the inmate is usually escorted to the execution chamber, which is typically a small room with a gurney or chair for the inmate to be restrained during the procedure. The inmate is then strapped to the gurney or chair and IV lines are inserted into their veins. These lines are used to administer a cocktail of drugs that are intended to induce unconsciousness, stop breathing, and ultimately cause cardiac arrest. Before the drugs are administered, the inmate is given the opportunity to make a final statement if they wish to. In some cases, they may choose to remain silent. Once the statement has been made, or if any, the execution team administers the drugs. The inmate typically loses consciousness within a few seconds and is pronounced dead within a few minutes. Now, you need to understand that the last 24 hours of a death row inmate are a solemn and emotionally charged time, both for the inmate and their loved ones. While the specifics of the execution process may vary somewhat between states and facilities, the general procedure remains fairly consistent. Although capital punishment is a controversial and divisive issue, many states and countries continue to use it as a means of punishing those who have been convicted of the most heinous crimes. The protocols and procedures used in carrying out these sentences are designed to ensure that the process is as humane as possible for all involved. Now let's look at the case Timothy McVeigh, who was executed by lethal injection in 2001 for his role in the Oklahoma City bombing. The day before his execution, McVeigh was transferred to the execution facility in Terre Haute, Indiana, where he will spend his final hours. He was placed in a special holding cell designed for death row inmates, with a small bed, a table, and a chair. McVeigh was allowed to make phone calls to his family and friends, as well as meet with his spiritual advisor. He was also allowed to request a final meal, which he declined, stating that he had already eaten and he had no appetite. The staff checked on McVeigh regularly, monitoring his physical and mental state. He was given a sedative to help him sleep, but reportedly stayed up most of the night reading books and watching television. At 6 a.m. on the day of the execution, McVeigh was awakened by the staff and given a chance to shower and change into a fresh set of clothes. He was then served a breakfast of oatmeal and toast. McVeigh was allowed to meet with his attorneys one last time to discuss any final legal matters or appeals. He was also given the opportunity to make a final statement, which he declined. 3 hours before his execution, McVeigh was allowed to meet with his family members and loved ones for the last time. He spent approximately 2 hours with them, saying goodbye and exchanging final words. The staff continued to monitor McVeigh's physical and mental state, checking his blood pressure, pulse, and other vital signs. He was given a mild sedative to help him relax. An hour before his execution, McVeigh was led to the execution chamber, where he was strapped to a gurney and hooked up to IV lines. He was given the opportunity to say any final words, but he declined. The execution team then administered the lethal injection, which included a cocktail of drugs designed to induce unconsciousness, stop breathing, and ultimately cause cardiac arrest. McVeigh was pronounced dead at 7:14 a.m. The last 24 hours of a death row inmate are carefully planned and executed to ensure that the process runs smoothly and with dignity. While each case may vary slightly in terms of the exact procedures or protocols, the general process still remains consistent. The case of Timothy McVeigh serves as a poignant example of the emotional turmoil and final moments experienced by a death row inmate. While his crime was heinous and unforgivable, his story highlights the humanity that remains even in those who have committed the most terrible crimes. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. So what do you guys think about the issues that are being raised? You can put down your answers in the comment section below. And do not forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification button so that you get more informative and entertaining content that is specially designed to suit your own needs.